it's brought in some people that were sort of been away from the club for a few years under previous ownership.
And
So
maybe previous like coaches and stuff like that, maybe over the last few years,
potentially,
or
yeah.
yeah, there's been a bit of
So
maybe fallouts, hasn't there, around the community of the club, and maybe this can help get those things ironed out and sorted. Yeah.
definitely from what I've seen, it seems to have made a much better atmosphere. And so we have to talk about one of the in British sport, one of the few openly gay owners in British sports. There's an article in the Pink News about this a couple of weeks ago that I saw. So it's good to again be spreading our word beyond the normal rugby league news
So,
to be getting into other news.
and just shows what an inclusive sport rugby league is. That it's not even a conversation that anyone's really had. But it's them going out there and trying to spread their own word to another pocket of society that maybe we can bring in as fans.
Yeah, exactly. And as always with rugby league, we'll still find something to moan about that has absolutely nothing to do with that. So don't worry. There's 500 other things we'll get to before anyone even thinks about anything like that, because there'll be, if it's not the prices at the bar, then it's what colour the second advertising hoarding from the left is.
So let's do a bit of a rapid fire kind of run through all of the clubs, and we'll give our predictions on where we think they're going to finish. We'll do it alphabetically. We'll start with Coventry, who Betfred, the title sponsor of the competition, have us 100 to 1 to finish top of the regular season table. That has them actually as the second bottom in the odds for that. Now, you're going to have more to tell me about Coventry than I've got really to add, so I'm just going to throw a couple of points out for you to kind of answer for me, and then you can talk about what's going on down there.
Yeah.
So, positivity mostly, very excited, some great results last year, but Coventry have one of the bigger squads in the division, and last year it felt like that was there because of player availability was sometimes a question mark. So continuity of team selection has seemed to be a bit of a problem for Coventry. When they could string 4 or 5 games together where they had the same team, they'd be able to pick up a couple of wins, but most of the year a lack of continuity. Is that fair to say, and do you think that might change this year?
I don't think that is fair in some respects, because if you look at when the squad was at its most ragtag, pulled together, and most debuts in a single game, that was the game against Keighley.
Okay.
That was the game, and that's mainly driven by the players that Coventry produce for the student game. So the players that play for Coventry that are then representing either student internationals, or like this weekend where they had the student North versus South game, that are getting representative honours, which is only going to help them, and it's something as a club I know they're very keen to encourage, because it's something that it only gives good experience to the players of playing in a different environment, in a different team structure. It's only going to be good, and they can bring that back into camp along with the rest of the things. So I think that's
right
only
behind the student game as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Tom Sang goes and coaches at Coventry Uni now to have a continuity to get some extra time with some of the players as well, which is only going to be of benefit. So there's quite a few, there's probably 4 or 5 players from that side that are common across both. So it means he gets that extra sessions and extra game time learning those players and learning how to operate with them, which is only going to help things. So I think part of the success in last year was driven around fitness, and the fitness towards the back end of the season. So initially it didn't look great, and there was lots of defensive frailties, and that as soon as that started to tighten up, the fitness really came into its own. And I think that's something they've been focusing on again this year, looking at what's happened in pre-season. Certainly been trying some different things, using a local boxing gym and some mixed martial arts to sort of throw in, as much to keep training interesting in pre-season as anything else, because certainly from when I was playing, one of the worst bits was always pre-season, was that bit where you were sort of a month, 2 months in, and you still had a month, 2 months to go.
Yeah.
And that bit where you sort of lag, and it's dark, cold, and horrible, and you think this isn't particularly fun.
Yeah.
And so I think keeping things fresh, and that's something that you're going to have to look to do this season anyway, just by all the fallow weeks and the gaps in the structure.
So pick out maybe a couple of players that they've lost from last year, and maybe some of the men that they've brought in to replace those, to fill those gaps.
Yeah, so I think Jason Bass at fullback and centre, I think is one of the biggest losses. Obviously, he's gone to York.
Yeah, we'll remember him.
He's fitting in that side.
Tries in the game that the BBC were there for. He played in the centre, didn't he, that day? Yeah.
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 So he's a big loss, I think, in those terms. Benstead of halfback has gone to North Wales.
Yeah.
So he's joined them. Interesting, again, it does create an opportunity. We brought in Nick Newman from Australia, filling the sort of Australian slot, which was departed by James Gertchens last year, and also means there's a couple of other players that we're vying for that second halfback slot, including Callum Merritt, who I saw in the pre-season game against Leeds, and he looked like he'd been in League One for years. He looked very assured, very confident, so he could be a real talent and a real find. So he's going to be doing very well. And the other one is Mitch Shaw in at hooker. I think he looks a good prospect, and him and Nathan Conroy, who's obviously experienced at this level and former Bradford.
Yeah, he's possibly one of the kind of headline signings, I suppose, for Coventry in terms of a player that people might have heard of, who's had a bit of time. Has he been at Hunslet? Maybe has he been in one of those?
Yeah,
one of those clubs.
Hunslet or Keepers? They play in green.
Yeah,
and Bradford before that certainly, and he again looked quality in pre-season. So I think that sort of axis that we've brought in is doing very well. I think in terms of players that stayed, Rhys Rance is one that really excites me to see him. Just see him coming on at the back end of last season. He did really well.
Yeah, and Dante Morley-Samuels and Cam Pearce-Paul are kind of highlight generating players as well, aren't they? That people
very
like
much so. Yeah.
To see, yeah. So Carson has Coventry at 6th. That's a little optimistic for me, but I'm going to let you go first on where you think the Bears are going to finish.
I think 7th is achievable, and I think 6th would be probably beyond, but not beyond the realms of possibility. But I think 7 is definitely achievable if things go the right way, and those key positions, there's a bit of luck with injuries in that. I don't think there's much in terms of a second string, but again, it's a large pool of players and it's deliberately built as that way, so there is a squad to be able to draw from. So there's definitely potential. Conversely, the chopping and changing means that if you do get on a run,
where do you have him?
I'm talking about
it
fixtures.
to try and make it sound nice. Where do you have them?
I've got them between 7th and 8th.
7th, let's say then. Okay, Tim. I'd love to put them in the top 7. I have a feeling that 8th is as good as Coventry would do, but I think 8th would be seen as progress. So that's a positive. Doncaster then. We talked a little bit about Doncaster earlier on. Some of the headline-grabbing names: Richard Owen, Matty Berrahull, Ryan Ball, Brad England, Frankie Mariano, and Brandon Douglas give a good weight and experience and skill set to that forward pack, and like previous Super League calibre coming in there as well. But they do have quite a small squad, and like you say, maybe relying on the Hull FC link up a little bit. So
we don't know when Hull FC get a new coach. They might well send a few players there who are out of favour, so it might, in some respects, work in their favour. Not yet.
Thought you were breaking news on the show.
No, we couldn't do that, could we?
It's happened once or twice, but not many times. Right, okay. So, Doncaster then. At first you thought they were going up. Now you've scaled back on Doncaster a little bit. Where do you see them finishing up?
So I've probably got them. I'm going to have to write this down so I don't do the same. I've probably got them in 4th.
4th, yeah. I think I've got them in 4th as well. I probably would have had them 3rd before I saw how thin their squad ended up being. But now I'm with you. I'm going to go with 4th as well on that one. Okay, so Hunslet. We haven't really talked much about Hunslet. They're another side with quite a big squad, quite a lot of turnover in their squad as well. What is there anything that jumps out about them, and where do you think they're going to finish?
Yeah, they've got a few decent players, a few campaigns there. You've got Dale Bloomfield, Vili Halafihi, some decent. I mean, they're a bit steady away. There's nothing particularly exciting, but I think they could well be one that do well as a team. So I'd probably have them in. Let's have a look. I'm probably going to go for them at sixth.
Sixth for Tim. It's really hard. It's definitely between them and Whitehaven in my mind for who finishes fifth in this table. I think I quite like what Hunslet have got around the creative positions, hooker and halfback positions. So I'm gonna go with Hunslet to finish fifth. Okay, Keighley we know are starting with a big points deduction, Tim. So what do you reckon?
I think they've done surprisingly. If you look at that squad on paper, certainly, although they won't have the pre-season in them because of all the disruption, there are some pretty tasty looking players in there. And I keep harking on about this, but all the gaps in the schedule caused by the relatively low number of games means you've got a bit of time to play catch up in your pre-season. So effectively, you could treat the first 2 or 3 rounds as pre-season fixtures and not be all that far behind. So I think they could well finish quite well, and I'm actually going to put them in seventh.
Seventh. Wow, I've got them in 10th. I think it's too big a to me this year. It's too big a jump to make up with London and Coventry having improved in my eyes. So 39-year-old Jamie Thackeray isn't gonna cut it. That's right, isn't it? He's old, isn't
he? Yeah, he is. I think he might even be older than Alan.
Have we got that to talk about later on? I think we might when we do the main show. So I've got them in 10th. I just think it's too much to make up. What I think is most important for Keighley is that they re-engage the community. They find a way to get young people interested in the game again in that town and get people playing the game around the town and people wanting to come through the doors and be engaged with the club. I think that's far more important than whether they win. And I still think in that level at League One, you can create that sort of excitement without necessarily having a champion team, because I think you look around at teams like London Scholars and Coventry and they've managed to do that sort of thing at times over the last couple of years. So I'm going to go with Keighley to finish 10th. London Scholars are next. London Scholars are an interesting one. They're one of the teams with another big squad. Lots of players who they've maybe brought in from around as well. Elias McCartney's dropped back down to there. Richard Wilkinson, he was up at Doncaster, wasn't he, before? They've brought in Tommy Chipchase. That's a funny name.
He's been there a couple of years. He was in the Oxford squad, and he's been there probably about 3 years. I think Oxford was still going when he went there. He's a sort of half-back. But probably only on the fringes of their squad in reality.
And they've got Mike Bichet and Lamont Bryan and Amara Caro, so they've got people flying high off the international scene as well, like Bryan and Caro and those guys. So they've got some good pieces. They've got the link up with the Wolfpack, which will help them off the field. They have link ups in terms of playing link-ups and that sort of thing with London Broncos and with Wigan Warriors, which I think will help them somewhat. Where do you have the Scholars finishing?
I've got them in 10th. I don't think there's enough quality in the key positions, and I think there's always a question, or certainly has been the last few years, around discipline and around the heads dropping. I think it's a slightly fragile squad and a group of players that can get quite down on themselves. I've seen a few games with them that they shouldn't have lost, that they lost from either positions of where they were ahead, in some cases by a couple of scores, or closely in, but they could have gone on to one. I don't think they've got quite enough quality there.
I think that if that's something that you've picked up, it's certainly going to be something the setup there has picked up, and I think they're going to have worked on those things. I've got them finishing 7th. I've got the Scholars